Hello and welcome. My name is Jody Russell Manning. I'm the Associate Director for the Rowan Center for the Study of Holocaust, Genocide, and Human Rights. Welcome to all of those who are here for the talk by Lucas Brenner. There are multiple events that are coming up. If you don't have a calendar, get in contact with me. I can send you one. And we are very happy that Lucas will be here. We have everything from book club to film screenings to talks coming up. So please join us for our events this semester. A couple things, we have study abroad, of course, every year. And this year in 2025, we will be doing Heart of Europe. There are multiple info sessions that I will go over. We start with in Budapest, Hungary. We then go to Krakow, Poland. We spend a full day at the Auschwitz Museum and then go to Prague and end in Vienna, Austria, where we have a Viennese concert before leaving back to the United States. So if you're interested in that, let me know, or please come to one of the information sessions. Tomorrow, we will have Jimmy Witowski talking about graduate programs at Rowan and information application, how different programs from the Holocaust Genocide Education Program to master's programs in history to his PhD program at Southern Mississippi. That will be tomorrow at 5. We also have Pitching Democracy by April Yoder next Tuesday at 11, and we'll be screening the film The Paradox of Seabrook's Farms on the 26th from 6:30 to 8, and that'll be followed by the director's panel discussion. We then have on the 1st, a very important talk by a third generation, Randy Stupler, about her grandfather, Simon Birnbaum. She will talk about his experiences during the Holocaust. In fact, Randy had 4 grandparents who were survivors, and it's very interesting that 3 of them would not talk about what happened during the Holocaust, but Simon did, and she now tells his story. And then we will continue with our book club. We're reading Final Verdict by Tobias Buck. You can join us on the 9th of October for our second meeting, and then we will be meeting Tobias virtually on the 13th of November. Okay, but today we're having a fellowship talk with Lucas Brenner. Lucas is a second-year graduate student who is currently pursuing his master's degree in Holocaust and Genocide Education here at Rowan. He got his undergraduate degree at SUNY in History, Political Science, and Adolescent Education in Social Studies. Lucas is planning on becoming a social studies teacher at the secondary level in New York once he completes his degree. Currently, he is a substitute teacher on Long Island, where he is originally from, which is part of the week when he is not on campus for class or working on his studies. And I believe, and you can let us know, you will be graduating very soon, correct? So I'm going to stop sharing and let you share, by the way. And welcome, Lucas. Thank you for this amazing talk.
So I will be graduating in the fall. So that's after this semester, so that's pretty exciting. And yeah, I mean, I've had Professor Manning for about 3 of my classes, if you do the program or if you're in the program. So yeah, great professor. So so I did the Holocaust so like this talk's gonna be on Holocaust education and beyond, and my experience doing the Warren Fellowship this past summer. So the fellowship, so the Warren Fellowship is a program that takes place at the Holocaust Museum in Houston, Texas. And the goal of the fellowship is pretty much to prepare future teachers and educators teaching about the Holocaust by providing them with tools and resources to bring into the classroom, or for those people for some people who pursue like museum studies, like it also helps with that as well. And like just like a quick summary, I'm gonna go more into like the day-to-day structures, but a quick summary is pretty much like a critical aspect that you do every day is you're gonna work in a group, like at your table. You're gonna, like, on your first day, you're gonna sit there, you're gonna be at a table with like 4 to 5 other people, and you're gonna be working with those people every day for about an hour to an hour and a half, coming up with a project, like a little miniature lesson plan based around an artifact at the museum. So that way you could incorporate, so that way you're combining uh, things you learn at the museum with the educational resources and strategies that they teach you. Uh, this link here is kind of just for like the general website. If you were like curious about like just like the museum as a whole, but I have a link further on that will kind of like explain more what the fellowship is in greater detail, if that will help. So this is a picture of the museum from the outside. You're going to be pretty much like passing this every day. You have to go through security when you go into the building every day, but it's very nice. The outside has actually a memorial where they have a rock for every single ghetto and concentration camp uh, throughout during the Holocaust. So they with a plaque below it. So that's kind of what that structure is on the outside as a representation. So, getting into it. So, who attended the fellowship? So, age-wise, fellowship participants ranged from the youngest person I met was someone who was just entering their sophomore year. Then there were people like me who were master students, and then there were people who were in the process of getting their PhDs. But to break that down even further, age-wise, like the average is people who either just finished their undergrad or people who just finished their first year of graduate school. So that's about like 21 to 23-year-olds. But I mean, the oldest I think I met in terms of like PhD students was people in like their late 20s, maybe early 30s. And the youngest I met was like someone who was like 18, 19 years old. So it's a pretty big age gap of people you're going to be working with. Background, most people participating in the fellowship were seeking careers in education, ranging from the elementary level through secondary all the way up to the college level. There are people who were there who were looking to become college professors. Most people tended to be secondary level, like across multiple disciplines. I met various English majors. I met even a few science majors. There was a lot of elementary school teachers, and there were a few people who wanted to be professors in the future, and those tended to be some of the master's students or PhD students. But that wasn't the only thing. So Rocco, just because you're the only one here, I'm gonna ask you: Are you a teacher? Not? Do you not want to become a teacher?
Yeah, my degree is for history and secondary education. So history teacher.
Okay, yeah. So this will be perfect for you. Even if you weren't that, like if you hear other people like couldn't come, this program I also met a lot of people who were interested in politics and policy who like wanted to talk about human rights and genocide because a lot of what we did around the fellowship, though it was focused on the Holocaust, was able to apply to a lot of these other different things. There were also people who wanted to be museum curators. So anyone who pursues museum studies found it very interesting because, you know, you have to work with adults and children of all different levels. So they gained a lot of skills. I had an economics major and I had a few people who were becoming school counselors. So there's a pretty wide array of people's backgrounds. Schools, there were people who ranged from all across the country. The furthest I met was people from California. There was a lot of people from New York, specifically Syracuse University, because the fellowship has like a second fellowship that also comes at the same time as you, where like they're based more in Syracuse. Obviously Texas. I mean, you know, I was Rowan, New Jersey. I was the only New Jersey school there. And some schools will have a bigger number of participants than others, and the schools that have a larger number of participants actually have like a faculty advisor that comes with them because it's so many students. Such as like Syracuse had that. Texas Christian University had that, and Lemoyne University had that. So quite a few of them had a faculty advisor with them. So this is a picture we took. This is everyone who participated in the fellowship, from museum staff to faculty advisors to physical students themselves. So it was a pretty big group. I think there was about 40 of us total between the two cohorts. Um, this is to show you like that, like not everybody's from a big school. This picture is the lady in the center with the blue with the badge on. That was the person that's Wendy Warren. That's the person who's in charge of all of the communication and is, you know, takes lead in the fellowship. She's like, though her last name's Warren, she's like not the actual person like who's funding the fellowship. Her last name just also happens to be Warren. And the other two females in the picture were people who were also the only person from their school. So we kind of just took a picture of like loners from our schools. Uh, and yeah, so getting into what I actually did day to day at the fellowship. So every day you're going to travel to the museum where you're going to be listening to lectures from scholars in the field, scholars who work for organizations connected with the field, and scholars who have either worked for the government or various other governments. Some advisors who go with those bigger school cohorts actually gave lectures themselves. And, I'm just going to give you a heads up, like, there's going to be some discussions. uh, Feel free to ask questions because like they're only there for like an hour lecture, maybe an hour and a half lecture. So, and not all of them are there every day. So if you have a question relating to that lecture, highly suggest you ask. But throughout the week, you're going to get to interact with Holocaust survivors. You're going to meet the person who the fellowship is named after is a Holocaust survivor, and her family, like her kids and her grandkids, do a lot of the funding for the fellowship. Uh, so like you're gonna meet so like one of their family members is going to be there every day, if not more, and they're second, third, and fourth generation Holocaust survivors. So it's very interesting to get to meet such a wide array of generational Holocaust survivors. And I believe the fourth generation one, I think she's either a freshman or a sophomore, so she's like close to our age. You're also going to get a tour of the Holocaust Museum on the first day. Like that's going to be like one of the first things to do on the first day. You get a nice tour of the museum. It's probably like a 2 hour tour, and they take you all throughout. The picture on the right is actually from the inside of the museum. That boat is meant to be a recreation of a Danish boat where they would hide Jews and try to save them and get them out of Denmark. You're also going to be allowed to explore the museum like during your free time, like during your breaks throughout the day, during your lunch period, like your lunchtime, whenever. I explored it a couple of times. I went to the gift shop. The gift shop had like a lot of good resources as well. And at the end of every day, they end every day pretty much with you working with your assigned group on your lesson based on your chosen artifact. So I'm just gonna pull up what my group did just to kind of like explain it more in depth for you. Okay, so my group, I'll go a little out of order just because like you weren't there. So my group chose this Star of David. It's in French. It says Jew basically in French, and we designed our lesson. Like my group was made up of me, who's secondary education. We had an elementary education person. We had a faculty advisor in our group, who didn't really help us. She was more just like there, like if we had any questions. We had someone who was museum studies, and we had a person who was actually who was going into policy and government. So only two of us had educational backgrounds. Uh, I had never designed anything for elementary, but the elementary education person wanted it to be for sixth grade. And that was like our compromise because I said, oh, like I've worked with 7 through 12. I haven't done too young. And she was like, I've worked K through 6. So we said, let's do sixth grade since that's closer for both of us. And so we basically designed a project around like yourself versus your public identity going along with that artifact, where Jews were labeled based off one identifying factor of themselves, the fact that they were Jewish. And we kind of came up with like this mini lesson that you're going to have to present on your last day. And it's like a 5, maybe 8 minute presentation that you kind of just do on the last day. All the groups are going to do it. And you kind of just listen to everyone's groups, and, they give some feedback. Yeah, so we kind of like broke it down. We said this would be work they would do before the activity of like they would kind of have to do like a personality web of things that make up who like their own identity. The day of the activity, we talked about having like a do now, a picture where people are labeled with the stars of David. We talked about kind of stuff we would teach them in advance to the lesson regarding the different victim groups, and as well as regarding like why they were labeled with the stars. We will also have like a map kind of like reviewing like the different areas that we're going to be talking about. And then like getting into the activity itself, we kind of have on the bottom here the different color markers that were used to like kind of show like what group you belonged. And we like kind of gave like background of like where this artifact is from, because the museum provided us with the information about the artifact itself. And then we had some questions for the students talking about like, has a field and like the artifact belonged to Ben Wasserman, who was a Holocaust survivor who ended up moving to Houston and helped found the museum itself. And so like we had questions talking about like, how did he feel? Like how does this reflect Ben's identity? Does it accurately reflect his identity? And other things such as like what other identities could he have had? And then we followed it up with like actually going over who Ben was. And Ben is sort of given like, I'll just give you like a summary. You don't have to read it. It's basically Ben's given a Star of David that's like a French Star of David, but Ben's from Germany. He never lived in France. And, we ended up going to a few, he was involved, like he witnessed the Kristallnacht. His family was split up. Some of his family members died. And essentially, like the question remained of like, how was he given this French Star of David if he's a German Jew? Because you'll learn at the museum, but I'm sure you might have some background knowledge yourself, is that the Germans were essentially like, if you're from this place, we're giving you a star from what country you're from. So it was kind of like this big question of like, Ben's given the wrong identity of being a French Jew. And that kind of stayed with him like throughout the entire time that he had this star in him, but it wasn't actually representational of his identity. And then we like made a worksheet to kind of like, have the hypothetical sixth graders go further, talking about Ben's story and things like that. And yeah, so that's essentially the activity you're going to be. Okay, there we go. That's essentially the activity you're going to be doing. And the other thing is just like a Google Doc of a worksheet, like more like up close, not just like the sort of like the cut picture we put on the slide, but a more like in-depth document itself so they could actually read it. And presentation, like artifact presentation, is going to go in a folder. So all the different groups. So even after the fellowship, I have access to people's work. Like if I want to use it in my classroom or as a resource one day for whatever, even as a reference, I have access to it. So you're also, so like this, like I said, you're going to get to meet a survivor. And because our cohort was about 40 people, they split us up 20 and 20. 20 people met a female survivor named Ruth. They actually gave us like her bio for people who couldn't go to hers because they went to the other Holocaust survivor, William or Bill Orland, who I went to. And Bill is, just to like give you some background, he's about 95 in this photo. He was a 95-year-old Holocaust survivor who, he's like from Poland. He lived in Russia. He lived in Kazakhstan. He was basically, his survivor story was essentially that he moved country to country, like escaping the Germans and fleeing like further into Russian territory in order to avoid being captured. And, he kind of talks about his experience. He talks about like his life after the Holocaust, and they gave us like a summary bio about him. But like I said, he's about 95 when we took this photo. I think he turned 96 because I think his birthday was a little bit after we took the photo. And, he moved to Houston after the Holocaust, and he, like years later when he like started his own life, and he was one of the founding members at the Holocaust Museum in Houston. And like that's something that made the museum very unique, is that all the founders of the museum are Holocaust survivors. Like the museum, like most of the survivors in Houston and the surrounding areas really took the lead in founding the museum and like designing it how they wanted it to be designed. So the application process, it's not really difficult at all. It's pretty quick. I'll admit I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to do it or not, because I wasn't sure if I was going to have a work conflict, but I was able to get off. And I pretty much did it like the week before it was due. So I could tell you like straight up, it's not that difficult to fill out. They're gonna ask you like basic questions regarding like what school are you from, what year, other basic information. They'll also ask you questions about what classes have you taken on the Holocaust and genocide. Uh, and since you're a teacher and because it's directed more towards teachers, they ask you what grade or age groups you want to work with. I just put like 7 through 12 because I didn't have a preference. I don't know if you have a preference. It probably won't matter, but they just like to know because that could affect how they like do some of their programming and also just so they have it for their records. Two important things to keep in mind. You will need to write a small writing sample. It's basically just going to be like an example question of like what do you hope to gain from the fellowship? I couldn't remember the exact length because when I tried to go back to my application, it's a Google form. And after like the deadline passed, like I couldn't re-look at it. But I'm pretty sure it only had to be about maybe like a page and a half at most, and maybe 800 words at least. So, really not that bad. And if you're a teacher, like if you're planning on becoming a teacher, obviously like that's, it makes it a lot easier to write. Another important thing is that you're going to need to list 2 references for the fellowship that they can contact to ask if you're going to be a good candidate or not. I did Professor Manning and I did Dr. Rich, who was my advisor at the time. They were both in the HDE program. I had them both as professors. And another thing you're going to have to do is that you're going to have to, one of your references is going to have to write you a letter of recommendation for the fellowship as well. I did Professor Manning because by that point I had taken 2 classes with him and I felt that we had a really strong, we had a good enough relationship that I felt he could write me a good recommendation. And on top of that, he also was the one who told me about the program. So I also thought it'd be helpful to have someone who knew about the program more so write the recommendation. So some other key things to know, it's the cost. Most of the fellowship is completely paid for, except for a few dinners. So they're going to be paying for your lodging. Like you're going to stay in a hotel. You're going to have a roommate. You're going to be there. If you have to, when I did it, it was a Monday through Friday. It started Monday morning and you left Friday afternoon. So they covered it Monday through Friday morning. But if you're from out of state, like if you're from New Jersey and you have to fly to Houston and you have to fly in Sunday night, they will cover your Sunday night as well. They cover your airplane tickets both ways. They give you, depending on when your flight is, you either get your own personal car that drives you to and from the hotel, or if some people have the same flight or around the same flight time as you, you ride with a group of people to and from the airport. And most of your food's going to be covered because you're going to be getting there like 8:30 every morning. You're going to be there from 8:30 a.m. to 5 p.m. most days, and some days you're going to be there from 8:30 a.m. to 8 p.m. So they give you breakfast, they give you lunch, and if you have to stay there till 8, they give you dinner, and they're going to be all catered meals that they provide. They're accommodating the food allergies or diets depending on what you need. And the first 2 days, well, I flew in Sunday because I was flying from out of state. And when I flew in, I think I had to pay for my dinner the Sunday night, and Monday night and Tuesday night, I had to cover my own dinners. But outside of that, every other night was the Wednesday night and Thursday night dinner was covered, and my breakfast and lunch were covered Monday through Friday. On the last day, in fact, they're going to take you out. It's going to be all the people participating in the fellowships, the museum staff, the warrant inspector families who fund the fellowships of the different cohorts, and all the lecturers that are still in town are all going to go with you. They're going to take you out to Kenny and Ziggy's, which is a Jewish deli essentially. And you're going to they're going to bus you. They're going to provide you with transportation. You're going to go straight from the museum to dinner, and they're going to bus you back from dinner to the museum. And yeah, so it's a lot of fun. You're definitely going to be exhausted by the end of the fellowship. I know by the time I got back, you're working. It's essentially like you're there for an 8-hour job. Even though you have breaks, it's long. You're listening to a lot of lectures. On the 2 free nights that I had, Sunday when I first got there, I didn't do anything because I got there late. So I was just kind of I wanted to get set up. But I know some people, there happened to be a baseball game because you're not too far from the Houston Astros stadium. So some people went to the baseball game. Some people went and explored the city. I went and explored the city a little bit, and they give you like a Metro card almost. So you have a few extra rides more than just what you need for the week. Um, you're gonna also have to like you're gonna learn how to travel to and from the museum on your own. It's pretty much like you go from your hotel, you cross the street, there's there's like a metro stop, you get on, you're on for about like, I don't know, 10 minutes, and then you get off, and then you do the same thing back. So it's not that long. Most people from the fellowship are on with you, and it's kind of like you're going on like your little work commute every day. Uh, I will mention that the attire for it is business casual, but like it became more relaxed as the week progressed. Like some people who were going to the airport, like when you go from the airport on the last day straight from the museum, some people changed in the more casual clothes after their presentations. But like I would say like the most casual you can be is probably like you still need jeans and a polo. I wear sneakers some days. I think I wore sneakers most days after the first day just because it was like, it hurt my feet to wear the dress shoes for like 9 hours, especially because if you wanted to walk like to and from the museum because it's not that far, uh, you know, that's fine. But I decided to just wear sneakers, but I would also wear like khaki pants and stuff like that. And the AC is great. Also, just to let you know, but like it was hot the entire week I went. It was about over 90 every day, but the AC is very good. So like unless you're outside, it won't be too bad. Um, and I will also say that the Warren Inspector families and the Fellowship Museum staff, like extremely nice, always helpful, and very informative on like whatever you need. They make you feel like very appreciated for attending the fellowship, even though you're the ones who should be thanking them. They make you feel like, you know, they make you feel very nice. And at the fellowship, like on your first day, you're gonna get a folder kind of like this. It's gonna have like it's gonna have the schedule for the week. It's gonna have like a notepad and pen, few other important information pieces. You're gonna fill out like a survey every day, like just to let them know how you felt about the day. It's also going to have the contact information of everyone of all the lecturers and all the participants at the fellowship and the museum themselves. So if you like want to remain in contact with anyone, you can. You're also gonna go and get you have like pre-assignment readings like before you go to the fellowship. Um, you know, I'd recommend doing them, but like they never brought it up to us exclusively where they were like, so what did you guys think of the readings? But I would just recommend doing them. And one of the readings that we did, they gave us the book, like a copy of the book when we got there. And we actually got to see the author give a lecture on the aspects of the book that we read. And he went over you know, his whole argument and why he believed this and provided information. And that was about an hour to an hour and a half lecture with questions. And we also got this book, which this author was not there, but they had someone who had worked with the author or was from the author's organization that also gave a lecture, um, uh, who also gave a lecture about stuff related to the book. But we didn't have to read this book. We had to read a different book, but they gave us this book because one of the lecturers had worked with that author. So, you got some free books, which is always very nice. And it actually helps you learn more because now you're like, if you really like the lecture, you have more material to reference afterwards and ask them questions about the books and stuff like that. This is a picture of us with Naomi Warren, who's a Holocaust survivor, and why the fellowship is named after her. This is her son. So he's a second generation Holocaust survivor, and we're at Kenny and Ziggy's in Naomi's booth, which she went to like I forgot if they said every day or like most of the week. Because like they said that the Jewish deli made her feel like at home. So once she passed, they put a plaque at the table she sat at. So this is the table that we're at, with the plaque. So some of the highlights that I found very unique. So, I finished my first year in the HGE program, And, I felt like I had a pretty good understanding of like a lot of things about the Holocaust and related to genocide. I went to this and even I was like blown away. Like there were things I learned that like I'd never even heard of before in my life. So some of my highlights, definitely probably my number one is that they had a Samuel Bach art exhibit. Samuel Bach he's a living Holocaust survivor. He was in a ghetto in Lithuania, if I remember correctly. And he was like basically an art prodigy. And they said that a lot of his artwork is used to because he doesn't exclusively like do artwork about the Holocaust, but he has elements in it that like, remind people of the Holocaust or remind people of other things such as like poverty, trauma, like and other tragedies. So they said his artwork's very universal. And I never thought about using like I'd never heard of him, but I never thought about using Holocaust artwork in a classroom setting before. So it was kind of eye-opening. And like probably for most people, this was their favorite thing that they got to see and learn about. Um, Another highlight is you get to meet a Holocaust survivor. I mean, it's always a highlight now that, unfortunately they're dying. So anytime you get to meet one, it's a pretty big honor. Um, we had a lecturer come in and give a talk about the Romani and Sinti and about the disabled victims of the Holocaust. So they had a longer time slot. And unfortunately, like they had to do a virtual presentation because they weren't able to, they had some issues that they weren't able to come in person. So we weren't able to really ask them as many questions as we would have liked. But probably one of everyone's favorite presentation just because these victim groups don't really get talked about as much when you talk about the Holocaust. So it's very interesting. And the lecturer even brought it to like modern times and talked about how like the Romani and Sinti are like still face a lot of like discrimination in Slovakians and other countries like that in the Balkans and Eastern Europe today. So it's very interesting to see like how like the progression still hasn't stopped. Uh Other lecturers, like there were lecturers from like organizations related to the Holocaust that like I had never heard of because often when you think about the Holocaust, you think about people when we talking about the past, like historians and stuff like that. But uh, the bottom picture is Mark Weitzman. He works for the World Jewish Restitution Organization, which is essentially an organization that works on getting like money payments or personal property back to the family members of Holocaust victims. Because when the Germans came in, they took all the property of the Jews. They took all their artifacts. They destroyed things. So this organization works specifically with, I think, with Germany. They might do a few other countries as well. I can't remember, but I know their main focus is Germany and working about getting those like payments back or getting that property back to the descendants of those victims. Another organization is Yahad in Unum, which is the lecturer who was associated with this book, The Holocaust by Bullets. So her lecture was about going into Eastern Europe and interviewing what are known as requisitioned victims or like witnesses of the Holocaust. So people who were like forced laborers who had heard about like mass killings during the Holocaust. And basically they go into Eastern Europe and interview them and then find the sites and like kind of like mark the sites of where these unmarked graves were of mass killings of Jewish victims and other victims. So, that's not something we're thinking about, that we're not thinking about that like people are still going out there and doing all this work. They even and like they were, she showed us like maps that she had and things that you could use in a classroom or museum resources. And I think they expanded to even include now they're like more focusing on Rwandan, or they started doing like Rwandan genocide victims as well, started doing it there. So it was very interesting to hear that like there are people who are still doing active work that like wasn't just looking at like old documents. Like there were people still going out there and like doing, more field work related things, like physically going over there and like interviewing people. You're gonna make a lot of new friendships and you're gonna build relationships with future teachers or people going into other careers that like, had a passion for this. So you're going to be able to make a lot of connections that way. You're going to gain a ton of new knowledge. You're going to learn a lot of new strategies and resources. In fact, when I came back, I spent, I think, about the week going over my notes and organizing it and putting the resources that they gave me sort of in like a shared Google Doc so that I would be able to reference it. They're also like, it just happened that like a lot of lecturers mentioned different films that like they would recommend either using in a classroom setting or that they recommend you watch and like sort of gaining deeper knowledge on certain things. And they weren't all like, the basic films that like people associate with the Holocaust. They were like films you've probably never heard of. So it was very interesting to, now you sort of have like a watch list almost of like movies or stuff you wanted to maybe check out. Uh, so at the end of the day, why I'm telling you to do this fellowship, Rocco, is that it's going to come at little or no cost to you. You have an opportunity to improve your teaching skills and gain valuable resources and tools for the classroom and beyond. You're going to have your eyes opened and you're going to learn more about the Holocaust and about other genocides than you ever have before. You're going to make a lot of great connections with people that like are going to last you well beyond your time here. Like during that 1 week. So it's very nice. And like the fellowship pretty much at the end of the day is like, you could always ask us for resources. Like you're always going to be part of our like our organization, like our networking, sort of. And before I end, yes, I believe this is my last slide. Before I end, this is just going to take you to the website if you want more of a description from last year, like the application page. Um, so it's just so it's basically that, it's telling you like what the fellowship is. It's telling you that they have over 400 alumni since 2003 across the country. It's for pre-service educated teachers is mainly their target audience, but I'm going to say that though some of the programming is directed at teachers specifically, even if you're not a teacher, I'd still recommend doing it, especially if you want to consider museum studies. It was also very good for that. They also go over sort of like, some of the things they're going to be doing. And yeah, it's just kind of going over that. If I could, but, and they have the previous agendas from the past years. They haven't updated it from the 2024 summer, but if you want to take a look at the agendas, they have them here. Just to sort of get an idea of what you're going to be doing. And if you have any like questions or anything like that you want to ask them specifically, they have that here. And yeah, if you have any questions, comments about the fellowship or about the application process, you could ask me now. But like if you think of ones in the future, like this is my school email. If you want to like email me a question, I'm pretty good at getting back to people. So yeah, I'll just, I could stop sharing. If you have any questions or anything like that you want to ask me while we're here. Oh, or anyone wants to ask me, you could do that.
Thank you so much, Lucas. That was really, really great. Thank you. So yeah, I'll just open up to questions if anybody has questions in the audience. So yes, go, Lauren.
So Lucas, this isn't necessarily a question about the fellowship, more about the museum. And since we took memory this summer, and we talked a lot about memorialization, I was wondering if you visited the one in DC as well and how they kind of compared, if you noticed that they had different methods, if they focused on different aspects of the Holocaust that one might not have.
Yeah, definitely. So I've been to the USHMM. I went when I think it was my high school graduation gift. I wanted to go to Washington, D.C., and I went there. And their museum just felt, to me, it wasn't as big, but it felt like more personal because all of the survivors, I think they said when it was first starting, they had 60,000 or 60,000 survivors or 20,000 survivors that were part of this big thing. They even have an immemorial room where they have a lot of the survivors names are up there. So it felt more personable and it felt like they're ever changing. They just now put in a temporary exhibit about I just checked their website earlier. They just put in a temporary exhibit about this Jewish tailor who was a Holocaust survivor, who was a tailor for presidents, because that guy died. So now they're doing a special exhibit on his story. They have community engagement talks. We went to a talk where Mark Weitzman did a night talk on anti-Semitism and the history of it, and then sort of leading into today. So I would say their museum just felt more personable and more community oriented. The USHMM is more it's more for the public. Like it's more for like it's the big tourist attraction. Like not that this isn't a tourist attraction, but this one I felt like they were giving school tours when we were there, like camp tours when we were there. So it just felt like it was very focused on the area.
Thank you.
Yep. Anyone else?
Other?
So this event in Houston, it's always going to be in like the mid to late days in May.
Yeah, it's usually like the last like week or two of May, like depending their scheduling, just because they do like a lot of other programming. Like I think after our program finished, they had like a week recovery and then they were doing like summer teacher training. So they're always on the move. But yeah, it's usually around that time period. Uh, but I like I said, like I thought I wasn't going to be able to do it because of a work conflict, but it happened to work out. That I was able to go and like it's only 1 week, so it's not like you're sacrificing like a ton of time. It's only Monday through Friday, or even if you have to fly out Sunday through Friday of 1 week. So I'd highly recommend if you're able to like arrange your schedule to do it.
Yeah, I think they try to start it right after graduation, right? So the typical graduation, and then right before summer starts, right? It also typically collides with my study abroad, which is always right. Yeah, but it's a great program. Lucas, I have a question real quick. I'm just thinking about, right? We're recording this for students and for those who are interested in the program, but for teachers, right? I know you mentioned a lot of things that you covered, but what 2 or 3 things do you think that you're going to incorporate in the classroom when you teach, or have you already, right?
Yeah, definitely one of them is incorporating Samuel Bach's artwork. Like just so interesting and so like life changing, like to like think about teaching the Holocaust using that sort of material. That was definitely a big one. Another big one was, I would say, would have to be sort of just showing the students the relevancy of the Holocaust still to today by talking about those different organizations that like are still doing work related to it. And for your Holocaust memory class, I did my book. My book review was on the Holocaust by bullets, and I talked about like this unheard of group of victims that like you never think about, or like is very little talked about. So sort of talking about that requisitioned group and those victims that like were witnesses uh to the Holocaust by bullets, and like sort of bringing that fact of that like a third of the victims aren't even killed in a camp. So like I think that's another big thing I want to bring into the classroom. And probably the third big thing is sort of I probably want to do more focus on, they had a big section devoted to people who like helped Jews throughout the Holocaust, like famous diplomats, church figures, like things like that. And I feel like though that's not super talked about. So I want to incorporate more of that and sort of talk about that, like it's not just the big names you think about, like there's other people that like were involved that don't necessarily get the same attention. So those were probably the three big things that will stick with me.
Thank you very much.
I have
Yeah.
a question.
Yeah, Mo.
Was there anything that like you disagreed with or that you had beef with during this program? Like anything they were teaching or just how they function?
I will say my biggest disagreement, which is just really like a preference thing, and like if you ever take a Holocaust class with Professor Manning or do any of the HCE classes, it's going to get brought up as like the sort of like the graphic nature of the content you showed. Because some people were really against showing like any graphicness, and some people were very much like, some people were more on like the, if you're going to show it, you have to show with an intention and sort of like streamline how you're going to show it. And some people were like, I'm just going to show you. We're going to talk about it and like debrief, but I'm going to show you because I don't want to be sort of like gatekeeping the true horrors. And I'm more of like in between the streamline and the not gatekeeping aspect of it. And some of the lecturers who were saying were like, I'm only going to show it if, I'm not really going to show like a lot of it, or I'm going to extremely streamline what I'm showing. And I was just like, well, as an educator, you're not showing them what it is. because the truth of the reality is, unless you're like interested in it, the second you walk into your world history or US history class, you're never talking about it again in an educational setting, never talking about it again. So, that was the big thing I disagreed with. And just like something else I'll mention that was, I don't think it's going to be unique to my year, but was unique in my cohort, was that because of the events going on with October 7th, they had to make an announcement about like, we're not political. We're not really talking about the sides. This isn't what the thing's about. And we had people who would ask the lecturers like pointed questions about the events going on. And we had people walk out like in protest during the talk, like during the thing, that we just didn't see them for a couple of days. And like they had to then come out again and say, this isn't what this is for. You could talk about it at your table. You could talk about it at a different time, but this isn't what our focus of the fellowship is about. So I think, unfortunately, that's probably going to be the case that they're going to have to address, at this one, unfortunately, with the way things are going. But I would say like that definitely made it more unique and made it like kind of tough to talk about certain things.
Thank you, Lucas.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Okay.
I have one question.
Go. Yeah, go ahead.
It's for you, Professor Manning. It's about
yes.
like contacting. I know that Professor Dak is on like sabbatical right now, or like he's on like leave. So if I were to like email him to like his Rowan email, like, is he still like, or I don't know if you would even know this, like, is he still actively like on it or like using it? Because like if I would like get like a recommendation or like a reference, like I would probably ask him for it. Or
yeah, Rock, 100%. And if he wasn't replying, right, which he will, I just talked to him the other day actually through email, then I can follow up with him. So
okay.
Yep. Yeah, definitely. So you're thinking about applying?
Yeah, I mean, like it's kind of hard not to if it seems like I mean, paying for food, that's fine. That's not a problem. I mean, I really wanted to visit Texas just in general. So being able to go out there would be a good opportunity. And I mean, if they pay for flight and board, like it's kind of like a trip abroad almost, but or a study abroad, but not as long, but it's free or mostly free. So that's definitely very enticing too. And yeah, so I mean, I'm definitely considering it. I'd have to. It's in May, and I saw the due or the deadline to like apply was like around March. So there's still like some time to figure out all the details of it. But I'd definitely be interested in applying for it. So
yeah, and very educational, right? You're going to learn so much, and as Lucas pointed out, meet new friends, lots of resources. Yeah, as far as I remember, they open up applications in January. But I will send out emails either way when they open up applications. So great. Again, Lucas, thank you for this really informative and rich talk. We learned so much, and I hope that it's going to inspire students to apply and go on this amazing program. So thank you very much.
Yeah, you're so welcome, Professor Manning.
Yeah. Thank you, and I will see most of you in class. So, and Lucas, I'll see you on campus. Have a good night.
Amen.